So naturally, recently at Evo, Arxis had some pretty big announcements, including the much anticipated Lucy trailer, which, by the way, for the people on YouTube, I do have my reactions and thoughts on the Lucy trailer up on my channel already. So if you guys want to go watch that, you can do that. She looks super duper cool, and I was freaking out about her. But today, I want to focus on something a little bit different. I want to focus on Arxis' other announcement, which is this: Guilty Gear Strive 2.0. So this is kind of the big deal for Arxis' announcements when it comes to Evo, I would say. This was a very interesting announcement because, as big of an announcement as it is, they also didn't really give us any details about what this update actually is. They're just like, yep, we're releasing it, stay tuned for more. And they didn't give us any specifics on what the update would actually be. Just kind of this implication that, hey, we're doing a big update for Guilty Gear. We're going to do some type of maybe overhaul or just giving it a new coat of paint, something like that. And today I want to talk about that. I actually want to talk about what can we expect from Guilty Gear Strive 2.0 in terms of, release date, in terms of pricing, in terms of what types of changes do we want to see, what types of additions, what types of content do we want to see in this big of an update. So this video is going to be a lot of speculation and kind of just hopes and dreams of what we would like to see in a Guilty Gear Strive 2.0. So I actually asked over on Twitter today, and I got a lot of different replies over there of what people would like to see when it comes to a 2.0 update. And I think that's really kind of puts into perspective of how many different things they could end up doing in this update. Which, by the way, for those of you over on YouTube, I would love to know what you guys are looking for in Strive 2.0. Let me know down in the comments below. What types of changes or additions are you looking for? What characters do you want to see? I would love to know, just get a feel for what the community is looking for. But in any case, today I want to talk about what can we expect in Strive 2.0. So I think the first thing we should actually talk about is the release date when it comes to this, because they didn't actually give us a solid release date. They just said 2026. As big of an update as this is going to be, I do have one thing that I haven't seen many people really talk about that is kind of a unfortunate downside to what they're planning to do. I do think it's really valuable and correct that they are planning to do a large-scale update. Guilty Gear has been kind of coasting on its popularity for a little while now, and I think that's been fine, right? The game's doing well, people are playing it, people are mostly happy. But I do think that Arxis wants to do more with the series, and we kind of need a shot in the arm, so to speak, if we really want to put Guilty Gear back up on top. However, one downside that comes with this is that they just gave us a 2026 release date, which presumably means that it's not going to be, a January release. It's probably going to be a little bit later into the year. And I think what that means is that outside of the Lucy update that we're getting here in late August, I don't expect any other type of Guilty Gear content drop until 2.0 releases. I don't really mind that we have to wait that long for another content drop, especially because there's other fighting games coming out with, 2XKO and Marvel Tokon, for example. But it does mean that we have this kind of drought, I would say, in terms of content, most likely. Of course, they could end up doing, another balance patch or have some other plans that they just haven't talked about yet, but it's probably most likely that we just don't get anything. So when it comes to a release date, what I'm kind of expecting is this will release sometime after Arc World Tour is over, which Arc World Tour is slated for mid-March, I believe. So I would expect maybe an early April release date. The reason for this is because it's right after Arc World Tour, so they don't have to worry about any Pro Tour shenanigans. They're not changing the version of the game people are playing mid-tour or for the finals specifically. And it also gives them enough time that the game can be out for Evo potentially. And Arxis really likes to focus on Evo for their release cycles, I've noticed. The only thing that might throw a wrench in this plan is we don't know really when Marvel Tokon is releasing, which is, obviously Arxis' other major game right now. And presumably, based on the fact that that game's getting a beta next month, that game might not actually be that far away. So I could see them releasing Marvel Tokon maybe December, January, February, and then having Guilty Gear Strive 2.0 be a couple of months after that. And I think that'd actually work out really well if that's true. The other thing we need to talk about in terms of this is the pricing model for this, because as of right now, they didn't really state whether this is just actually an update, they have been doing, or if it is effectively a new game. Because Arxis has a history of doing what I call title updates. If you look at stuff like Guilty Gear Xrd, they then did Revelator and then Rev 2. They did it with Blaze Blue, doing Chrono Phantasma and then doing the extend version. And even more recently, they've done it with Grand Blue, doing the Rising version. Arxis is very familiar with doing these kind of title updates where, they add a bunch of things to the game. It's more than just a standard seasonal patch. It's here's new characters, here's new mechanics, here's, just a bunch of stuff. So in terms of whether the game is going to be more expensive or not, I don't really have a read on that because we don't have actual details on how much content is going into this. And I think that's really what it's going to come down to for me personally, whether I care if we have to pay for it or not. If there is a bunch of content, right? Like if this thing is just chock full of new stuff, I don't really mind if I have to pay for it. Like that's fine with me. And I think Guilty Gear getting a big content update like that would be really exciting. But if it's not like that big of an update, I think that if you have to pay for it, it'd be kind of unfortunate, especially if there's not something where like if you own Strive now, then, you know, you get like a discount or something. But so anyways, with those two things out of the way, we have to actually talk about what type of content do we expect to be in this update. And the first thing we can talk about is, as we see in this screenshot, they're heavily implying new characters, because we see what is presumably Robokai here on the left and Jam over here on the right. So when it comes to new characters, you know, even just 2 new characters I think is like pretty good. I would be pretty happy with that. I know a lot of people want more characters, but for me, Strive already has so many characters in the current roster that I wouldn't be too bothered if they just add 2 characters and kind of called it a day. Especially assuming they plan to add more characters down the line in 2.0, like do another, you know, season pass. The big thing for me with Strive 2.0 though is I think it's a great opportunity to go back and refine the current cast members. Like I said, there's a lot of characters in the game currently. There's over 30 characters. If they took this opportunity to go back and refine the characters that currently exist and also just system mechanics, that's really what I'm looking for in Strive 2.0. I think this is a great opportunity to kind of work as a soft reset button for Strive. You know, Strive, I would say, it was a pretty messy game on launch. There was a lot of just like weird ideas. It didn't really feel like the game was fully realized. Like they didn't have a clear vision of what Strive was supposed to be. And over the years, they've just added more things and changed more things. I remember in a recent interview, they're actually talking about how it has become difficult for them to manage the game as it is, in terms of it's hard to add on top of the game without things becoming severely imbalanced. And as we've seen, especially in Strive Season 4, I think they've really struggled with that. So if they use 2.0 as a chance to, again, kind of soft reset the game and just, you know, remove some things or change some things that maybe aren't really working out, and just better consider what do we actually want the game to be, what do we want these characters to do, and make changes according to that, I think that'd be really exciting. Because at that point, it's almost like we're getting an entire new cast of characters if they make actual drastic changes to everybody. Another thing I feel currently about the roster is there's not that many more characters to add. Like they're adding Jam and Robokai, which are probably 2 of the more popular characters that aren't in the game yet. And after that, you're getting really at the bottom of the barrel in terms of popular characters. So for me, I'd rather just see them just make the currently existing roster more fleshed out and more interesting, and just kind of change them up a lot. Beyond new characters, I think the next big thing that's worth talking about is just new mechanics. Usually in these types of updates, ArcSys definitely likes to add brand new system mechanics to the game. We're kind of at a weird point though, where I think Strive has enough system mechanics, and some of them are still kind of problematic, namely like wall assault, for example. So I do think a new system mechanic kind of is in order in terms of just, you know, making the game different and exciting. But it does feel kind of difficult to just jam another system mechanic into the game without really refining or changing the currently existing ones. And I'll be honest, I don't even think the community would be that upset if they just straight up removed wall assault. I know whenever they did Grand Blue Rising, they actually removed some mechanics. They removed OD and they removed the brush mechanic. So it's not unheard of for ArcSys to just remove mechanics from the game if people aren't really fond of them. Especially very centralizing mechanics like wall assault that I think honestly kind of hold the game back. It kind of pigeonholes what they're allowed to do with design elements. So I'd be cool with them removing something like wall assault and adding another system mechanic instead. I don't know if that will happen. I maybe even wouldn't even bet on it, but it's worth noting. Someone in my chat is saying, are we imagining that it being at 2.0 means it needs to be fundamentally different in some way rather than a refinement? I think this is actually a really interesting point, because I think 2.0 has a difficult job of, they need to shake up the game and add new elements to it and all of that in a way that makes it feel new and fresh and exciting, but doesn't alienate the people who currently like the game as it is. And that's always a really difficult middle ground to land with this type of update. I'm really curious what end of the spectrum ArcSys is mostly going to lean on, because I think a lot of people are relatively happy with the foundation of Strive as it is, but I also don't think that many people would be upset if there was like a bigger shakeup on some of the core systems of the game. And that's kind of what we can get into next, I guess. So one mechanic that a lot of people are going to talk about in terms of, you know, maybe they'll add it with this update is like force breaks or like traditional EX moves that you see in other fighting games. I personally think this is something that I would like to see. I like EX moves. I like a focus on meter management in games. And, force breaks obviously were a mechanic back in the day for Guilty Gear. I do think that if you included that, it would be difficult to balance, obviously, because now you have to make force breaks or EX moves of different special moves, and you have to balance it around how tension already works in the game. So it would definitely be difficult. You'd have to really think about how you implement that. But it is something that just obviously adds a lot of fun and new ideas for characters because they effectively get new moves. So that is one kind of obvious mechanical addition from past games that they could add. I do want to say that I would really like to focus more on like brand new mechanical ideas if we could, rather than just always rehashing mechanics we've seen before, personally. Yeah, I do like that force breaks weren't on every move. I don't think you have to make like EX versions of every move. Another system change that I'd actually be a really big fan of is Airdashes. So in Strive, they did this thing to Airdashes where they made air dash forward like really slow. There's a lot of startup to your air dash in Strive that I never really liked. I do think it technically works with how they designed the game. It's not like wrong. Just preference wise, I don't really like air dashes being slow like that. And specifically, air dash back goes like nowhere in Strive compared to other games that have air dash backs. So one thing I think that they could do is, open up the air game a little bit more. I think Strive really tried to make Guilty Gear more of a grounded game rather than allowing a bunch of crazy air options. And that feels like a pretty obvious part of the game to open up again. And, with the ability to go back and refine how the game currently works, I think they could adjust system mechanics and characters accordingly to allow, better air movement like that to exist again. Another mechanical thing that my chat is bringing up right now too is the addition of simple inputs or like a modern input system. I feel like this is pretty likely to happen. The only thing that makes it kind of difficult with Guilty Gear is some characters have too many special moves for like a simple special move input system, similar to like Granblue or like what Marvel Tokon is doing. As long as executional inputs stay in the game, then I don't think there's any issue with adding simple inputs. It just makes the game easier to play for some people, and I think that's fine. A modern system for characters would be a lot trickier. I think there's actually a lot more that goes into designing a modern control scheme, similar to what SF6 does. But I could definitely see some type of like simple input system being added to the game. One thing I don't think will happen, surprisingly in a way, is auto combos. Auto combos are a pretty big thing in a lot of other ArcSys games, but I don't think Strive is designed in a way to allow for auto combos. I'm not like inherently opposed to the idea of auto combos. I like realistically, I've played a lot of games of auto combos and they never bother me. But specifically in Strive, I think it just doesn't fit with how the game is designed. You'd have to really change a lot of things to make auto combos make more sense. That does bring us to another thing a lot of people bring up, which is it finally time to add more Gatlings to Strive? And I personally think this is a tricky one, because for me, with how the game currently works, a big complaint a lot of competitive players have with Strive is that you actually convert from too many things right now. Characters full combo from, K buttons, P buttons, slash buttons, like it almost doesn't matter what you hit people with these days, you just full combo from them. And it's something that in comparison to like launch Strive, I think a lot of people kind of dislike, and I think doesn't actually fit with the original vision of the game. So it's kind of one of those areas where it's a good time to, reconsider what is the game supposed to be. Which is to say, if they want to add Gatlings to the game, if they want you to be able to do stuff like a K button into a slash button or something, I think that can work. But you definitely have to heavily change so many things about the characters and the systems as they exist now. You can't just shoehorn them into the current version of Strive. I don't think that'd work very well. If they want to go through all the effort to allow people to do that, then that's fine. Going back to that tweet I mentioned earlier that I put out, probably the most common response I got from people, the thing that they wanted most added to the game, was actually instant kills. And I know this is a really big deal when Strive came out. I'm surprised that there is still so much demand for them this late into the game's lifespan. Like, we're 4 years in and people still want instant kills. I don't really have a strong opinion on instant kills. I think they're more of like a marketing thing or something that like more casual players or just fans of, I guess like people that are fans of the world of Guilty Gear would enjoy. For me, as someone who mostly plays the game just for competitive purposes, I don't really care. There are balance implications to adding instant kills, like being able to combo into instant kills and stuff like that. So for me, I'm like kind of indifferent so long as it's like balanced well into the game, competitively speaking. I think it's a good marketing point and people will definitely pop off for all the cool animations and stuff, but it's not something that I'm particularly super passionate about, but I could see them doing it because there was a lot of demand for this type of thing. Yeah, actually, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. I think Granblue actually kind of solved this problem. I really like in Granblue how with the SSBAs, the animation for like winning the round actually changes if you won with your SSBA. I think that's actually a really cool kind of compromise for instant kills. it gives you that extra flavor of like, here's this really souped up animation for winning with your super, but it doesn't relegate it to a move that you practically won't use most of the time while playing the game, at least competitively speaking. So I'd be really cool with them adding something like that, where every character has a specific super that gets like an extra animation if you win the round with that super. That would be really cool, honestly. Another big thing I think people would be looking for in an update like this is the idea of like character skins and just cosmetics in general. There has been such a clamoring for character skins in Guilty Gear Strive ever since release, and Airdashes just hasn't done it. They've barely released additional colors in the game. I think this is an easy area where just putting some skins on characters has like a very big turnaround. From like a marketing perspective, it just makes the game look new and fresh. You're literally putting a new coat of paint on characters, and people just like seeing the characters in cool new outfits. So I think this is an area that I personally would really like to see Airdashes dive into. And they do it already with Grand Blue Rising. That game already has character skins, and I think it's actually a really big thing for that game. And other fighting games, obviously, like Street Fighter and Tekken, they have, you know, different costumes for characters. So it feels like an area that Airdashes is like sorely behind on, and feels like a really easy way to make a new game feel different, because characters will look different. Which kind of leads me into another thing, which is just kind of an overall update on the game's UI and visual elements. Or one thing that they did in Rising is they actually updated the visual graphics of the game. Rising actually looks like considerably better than base Grand Blue, which is crazy because base Grand Blue already looked really good, IMO. And Rising, in my opinion, is actually Airdashes' best looking fighting game. It looks ridiculously good. Obviously, Strive is praised for its visuals, and I think doing a little bit of a visual update with maybe some of the new techniques that they've learned with all the newer games that they've made, I think that'd be really cool. And just updating like the menus. Like they did update the menus, like the main menu in Season 3, and that was pretty cool. The character select in Strive is awful. I still think it's like one of the ugliest character selects. It just feels so nothing. Like what even is that? The like versus loading screen with like the eagle, I feel like you could easily soup that up to be something like way cooler. The actual in-game UI, I feel like you could change. Visual elements like that, I think, go a long way with making a game feel new and fresh, because it's visually just different than what you're used to. So I definitely think that's like an area that Airdashes could absolutely dive into. The last thing that's on my list is more single player content. Now, this is not something that I care about personally, but I do think it's an area that Strive has been kind of criticized for. You know, the main single player is just arcade mode, or the story mode, which is essentially just cutscenes. They've already talked about with Lucy, they have bigger plans with her arcade mode that we don't really know what they are quite yet, but they said that her arcade mode is way longer than other characters and there's more mechanics to it. And I'm kind of wondering if that is a testing grounds for something to come with Strive 2.0. I think having single player content and just more stuff for people to do, especially like more casual players, I think is actually really important and is a good selling point for a game, because people always care about like, is this game worth the bang for the buck? You know, like, am I actually getting my money's worth? Having more things to do is just an easy way to entice people to buy a new product. So especially if Strive 2.0 is a product you have to pay for, I think having more single player content and just more stuff to do would be really valuable for people. So yeah, ultimately, I think there are a lot of things that you could talk about in regards to 2.0, and I think what it really is going to come down to, how big of an update do they plan on 2.0 be? In any case, like I said before, let me know what you guys think about all of this down in the comments below. Let me know if you're excited for 2.0 and the things that you want to see. I'd really like to know. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.